Afternoon, everyone. We were waiting for Patrick, but he's not arrived yet, so we'll just kick off. We're a couple of minutes past time, so we'll get going, because I know there's another meeting after this. We hope it's going to be in here, but we'll see how we go. Apologies have been received from the independent person, Rob Bennett, but he has sent an email, sent some communication, and we'll come to that as we go along. And so I will ask, as ever, for declarations of interest. Those who may have any declaration of interest now may declare it. If not, you can declare it any time during the meeting as we go along. Anybody interested? Going once, going twice? Excellent. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting can be found on pages 3 to 10. Are there any comments on those minutes? Is everybody happy? Silence assumes assent. In that case, I will sign them and we will carry on. Public questions are a little bit difficult because we haven't got any public here. And as far as I know, there's no public online either. So we will ascertain that there are no public questions. Item number 5 is to note officer delegated decisions. Are there any comments on item 5 before we move to 5A? Okay, thank you so much. In that case then, we're straight on to item 5A on pages 11 to 14. Yeah. Everybody happy with that? That's good. Item 6 in that case then, pages 15 to 22. We're home, aren't we? Really quickly. Yeah. So nothing from members. Mark, did you wish to come in there?
Happy to say a few words. So you have our 2 letters that we issued within the appendix to the covering report. And I think the key one to reference is the letter from DLUC on the 14th of March. And our priority alongside that letter is to resolve historic audits by working with councils where that is the case. Clearly, you are not one of those. But on the basis of that indication from the department, clearing all the backlog audits is clearly a priority, which is why we referenced not starting any 22-23 audits before the 1st of November at the earliest. And as of today, that remains still the case. Clearly, there has been a number of select committees in recent months, and DLUC and FRC have held a number of meetings with representatives of both district treasurers and county treasurers with a view to how they can support the audit market in the public sector and get it back on track. And I think the phrase they're using is nothing is off the table, but what that means in reality, until the minister stands up and says what it means, we don't know, and we can't really plan for that. So that, I guess, is the summation of where we are today, and our timeline has not changed from the letter that we issued, which is in your pack. But happy to take questions.
Okay, Mark, thank you for that. Please,
just very quickly. So when do you think they will be signed?
We're not commencing any audits until the 1st of November, so we haven't got a plan for which audits in order yet, as we're still working through the historic audits. Okay. So it's too difficult to give a timeline, I'm afraid, Councillor.
Okay, fine.
Mike, did you have anything there you wanted to say on that? No? Okay, anybody else? Okay, just because we got new members here, Mark, it might be useful just to give a little bit of background there as how we arrived in the position that we're actually in now, because they may not necessarily be aware of that.
Okay, sure. So the position we are in today is a position that impacts the whole of the public sector audit market, and it goes back almost, well, a decade, one could argue, and has been building into a problem in the early part of the decade, and then manifested itself about 4 years ago, just before COVID, with audits becoming late against the publication deadline set in the accounts and audit regulations. It started off with a few audits missing that deadline, but has grown in the last 3 years to a significant number. And I believe at the current date, there are over 1,000 audit opinions that are yet to be concluded for past years. And therefore, there have been a number of reviews by illustrious ex-people in the sector, and a number of select committees held to try and understand the issue. The Financial Reporting Council has been tasked as the shadow authority to set up a task group to be able to review the issues and try and resolve it. And in that shadow capacity as system leader for audit reform, it is working with DLUC to initiate that. And those are the discussions that I referenced earlier.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark. I just thought that, sorry to push on that, I just thought it was quite useful. But as Councillor Young has asked a question, I have a short statement here in front of me from the independent person, Rob Bennett. I don't know if you've got a copy of his question, Mark. Did you have a copy of that? Because I can read it out if not.
I don't, I'm afraid, no. So
okay, no, that's
great.
fine. Then I'll read that if that's okay. It's not too long anyway. And that is, we have received the following question from a council's independent person. He says, there are clearly a range of national issues that are impacting adversely locally. Can Mark provide an update on the timing of the 22-23 audit, as he mentions being able to do that in early summer? ? Is there anything that Mark can suggest to help the council work with EY to deliver as timely an audit as possible? In the second letter, it mentions not auditing CFB06 returns. I'm not sure what this is, and is there any implication for Cambridge of that decision? And I'm glad he said what is CFB06, because I didn't know either.
Okay, 3 questions. I'll go through them in the order he asked them. So as of today, we don't have an update on the commencement date for the audit for the 22-23. As I say, our priority and our focus is clearing historic audits elsewhere, but we will clearly discuss and liaise with officers at an appropriate time to come and do the audit as and when we know we have the availability and capacity to do so. I would say, how, in reference to question 2 and how we can work with the council, I think I would say historically we have always worked very well with officers. The audit's always been pretty smooth in the last 2 years. We've already had early discussions with Neil and the team about what level of documentation and support they need for the draft financial statements which have been published. We've had discussions about accounting for the impact of the triennial pension review, and those discussions will keep going. So I think we are in a good place. We just don't know the date at which it will commence. And hopefully I think that is reassuring to members. CFB06 is a very small grant claim which we don't do at the City Council, so wouldn't be an issue for you. But I can't remember if off the top of my head what the 3 initials stand for either. You put me on the spot.
I'm absolutely delighted to hear it, Mark. I thought I was the only fool in the room for a minute. So that's absolutely splendid. Made my day, that has. Oh, cracking. Councillor Bennett.
Apologies, Chair. I was just going to suggest, bearing in mind Civic Affairs meets quarterly, whether perhaps we could be briefly updated by officers on your progress in clearing the backlog, and reassured that at some point we will be able to say that we are audited. Would that be acceptable to you, Mark?
It would definitely be acceptable and be something that I would be planning to do through your meetings anyway. I think it's important that you have a clear line of sight of when we would be coming to do the audit and when we would be hoping to report the audit, so you have the assurance you need over the council's finances. So happy to sign up to that. And I have just found reference that CFB06, for those who are interested in the room, is Capital Receipts Pooling Grant Claim.
I think you had an unfair advantage there, Mark, with the information in front of you, but well done to you. It was going to be a challenge, wasn't it? So
It was.
that's great. That's great. You've got a smile, haven't you? What else can you do? Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Mark, one of the questions from the independent person sitting on the Civic Affairs Committee was in relation to the implications for Cambridge. Bearing in mind the timescales concerned, but allied to the new requirements that appear to be being published by DLEC about best value, is there some contradiction there that may be problematic for us to manage when referring back to DLAC, or is it just too early to be able to assess what that might be?
Yeah, good question. I think, honestly, it's a little bit too early to see what the implications are. What I do know is that the Financial Reporting Council, in their shadow role, are ensuring that there is no potential overlap which would cause further delays, because they're coming at it from a streamlining perspective and how can they catch up, and they don't want it to be overlaid with new requirements which just adds to the burden. So the two hands, if you like, are talking to each other, but I think it is too early to be able to conclude as to what the impact would be.
I think, presumably, can I just, I suppose, how would, if there was an impact, Mark, would you be able to communicate it through Caroline to us? Because clearly it feels like it's, although they mentioned in the letter to us about not wanting to step on the audit process, nonetheless, it does feel like there might be, because it's difficult for us to know if the audit has not been complete, how will we know if we're meeting best value requirements, if that makes sense to me, or maybe I'm being too simplistic about it.
No, I don't think you are. I think the reference in the letter is more driven at historic audits that are 3-4 years old, and therefore how can the department know that the authority is deriving best value, whereas clearly you are up to date with all of your audits and all of your value for money conclusions, so the department have assurance about you as a city council. The 22-23 audit is planned to be late, for sure, and there will be ongoing discussions about that. And as you say, I'm happy to come back and speak at your next committee as and when DLUC provide any further information on that. But I think the letter is more primarily aimed at councils who have historic audits and therefore the best value consideration.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett.
This is probably a question I should know the answer to, but I admit I don't. Will we get fined if our accounts are in late?
No, there is no fining mechanism in place for local government authorities.
Okay, I can remember I asked that once as well. Are there any other questions for Mark? Going once, going twice? Thank you very much for that, Mark. It sounded a little bit like we were giving you a grilling, but we weren't. At least we had a little bit of joviality in the middle of it. So
You're welcome anytime.
But will you be staying with us, Mark, or are you going to sign off?
I'm going to stay for a bit.
Okay, that's kind of you, just
you.
in case anything else crops up. Thank
Indeed.
you. Okay, members, that takes us to item 7 on page 23. Recommendations are at 2.1, and this will be introduced by Jonathan Tully, who we can clearly see in the room, large as life. Good to see you, Jonathan. It's over to you, if that's okay.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. So the purpose of my report tonight is to communicate our next 6 months of work and also feedback on the work from the previous 6 months. And that enables me to provide an opinion on our control environments. In addition to that, there is a long report, but I'm asking for approval of the Charter and the Code of Ethics. We provide this to the committee each year. No significant changes to the documents, but we include these annually to demonstrate how we comply with public sector internal audit standards. So we're starting off on page 23 of your packs. And what I will do, as it's a long report, I'm just going to pull out what I think are some of the key points for the committee to be aware of. With the plan itself, on pages 30 and 31 in section 5, this is where we talk about assurance types. It's just worth reminding the committee we break our work down into what we call core areas, and things we have to do because they're very important, or other bits of work which are predominantly risk-based. So it's about putting our resources where they can add the most value to the organisation. On page 32, there's a chart which I include each year. It shows how resources are split across different activity types. I suppose what I would comment for the committee for your assurance, it's broadly the same as last year. There's still been a large demand for core work, where before that was on business grant assurance, it's now on sort of other sort of cost of living type grant assurances, but it's pretty much the same as previous year. On pages 37 and 38, it's always important to note that the internal audit standards require us to note other activities which contribute to improving the governance, risk and control environment. So it's not just about providing audits and assurance. We also like to proactively work with the council help and add value. And we do that through advisory and consultancy services. So it's important to make you aware of those sorts of activities. So examples include working on the National Fraud Initiative and also transformation, which is a very important part of what the council's doing at the moment. Appendix B is our progress updates. That starts on sort of pages 41. And I would draw your attention to the opinion. Overall, we're able to provide a reasonable assurance on the control environments, which is the same level as the previous report, which we brought back to you in September last year. I would say we've got a better quality of assurance this time round. This is because we've been completing more audit work than what we were during the pandemic, when a lot of our resources were focused on the business grants. We still are undertaking those, but hopefully we are getting towards the end of the cycle of that type of assurance work and we're returning more to normal audits. And you'll see on pages 43, this is where we list the reviews, which you have completed. 12 since the last report, which is double the amount we reported at the same time last year. Pages 52, I mentioned the business grants. It's important to notice how we've been working and assisting the council with that. And then on page 53, I'd just like to mention that we've maintained our compliance with the standards. And just really for you to be aware as a committee that the global standards are currently being reviewed. So that's going to probably take at least 12 to 24 months, but we will need to adapt to those once they've been issued. And then finally, just on pages 50 through to 70, we have the other appendices. As I say, not much change from last year. All we've done really is reflect where the organisation has changed the structure. We've got different sort of titles for teams. We've made sure we've updated it to reflect those. So that was all of my reports. I'm happy to take comments and questions. I have noted a comment question from our independent person already. I'm happy to go through that myself, Chair, or would you prefer to read out the question? I'm happy either way.
I don't mind, Jonathan, as long as everybody's had sight of that question. If not, I will read it. Has everybody seen that question from an independent person? If not, right, okay. In that case, then, I just will read it out if you don't mind, Jonathan, because not everybody has seen it. We have received the following statement from the Council's independent person. A very clear and helpful report. Planning on a 6-month basis makes sense to me to provide flexibility. Is the team at full strength to deliver the plan? And if recruitment is needed, what is the experience? We know that has been an issue with external audit. The planned review looks to be covering a range of good subjects, and the work on asbestos management is important, given the results of the follow-up work on the last audit. It's good to read that the carbon management data review was full assured. And that is what it says. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, so some really good comments and observations in there. I sort of pick out one question, and that was around the challenge of resources. So we do have one current vacancy in the team, which we can backfill through agency workers in the short term. And sometimes that can be advantageous because you can bring in experience on a specific piece of work, so you can really target your resources. I think, it's the profession has got the same challenges as external audit, and also we've got geographical challenges as other roles in the council. So for the longer term, the other things that we are considering, we're exploring lots of ways to develop talent in-house, whether that's through secondments or apprenticeships. So I think we're okay to deliver the plan, but it's definitely an ongoing piece of work to make sure we can keep developing talent within the team.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bennett and then Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan, I've just got a few quick questions for you, but before I do that, I want to say that I'm not actually used to working with an internal audit service that is quite so broad in its range and deep in the quality of its work, and I think it's something members take for granted. So I'd like to say thank you and say I have huge amounts of respect for your team. Okay, that's a nice bit. Now I'll get into my questions, but they're really not that bad. I want to apologise for not asking them at pre-scrutiny, but I had an unavoidable diary clash. The first one is, considering the comments made by our external auditor, should we possibly be devoting more resources to pre-audit work, or do you consider your team is already doing everything it reasonably could? One. Question two is that considering that your work is so broad, I think it might be attractive to many young accountants, and maybe this could be something that you could stress in your recruitment material. I know internal audit is often seen as a Cinderella, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the third one is horizon scanning. And I wanted to mention 3 small issues, 2 related to housing and 1 general, and ask whether they had been part of your horizon scanning. The first one is, the first 2 are both inspired by Michael Gove, who is very prone to making incendiary statements about what council should be doing on their housing without following it up with cash and support or even guidelines as to what should be done. And I'm thinking here particularly about repairs and disrepairs and condensation, damp and mould, where I understand we are promised guidance at some point over the summer. But clearly there is a very big possibility of an expectation gap opening up and the council needing to take action to protect itself and its systems. The third one I was going to ask, and I know people are going to hate me for it, but I do think that it is a city council's duty to consider the impact on its finances of the STZ proposals. I do not accept the proposals need to be complete for us to make a preliminary evaluation, and I'd like to know at what point internal audit has plans to consider that and make a risk assessment. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Yeah, go
Thank you
ahead,
very
Jonathan,
much.
please.
Thank you. So the first question was in response to the comments from the external auditors and pre-audit work. I probably just wanted to seek a bit of clarification on that, Councillor, if that was okay. Was this with regards to sort of the statements of accounts? Or was this another particular area, just to make sure I answer with the right context?
I'm probably used to dealing with less sophisticated internal audit services than your own, but most of the ones I've dealt with in my day job concentrate on doing systems work and financial statements work so that the external auditors don't cost so much. So I sort of was already assuming that there was a role that you were performing there, and if that's not the case, I apologise.
That's fine. Just to seek clarifications, really. So we do have ongoing dialogue with the external auditors about providing assurance. And obviously what we want to do is work as smartly as we can together in a lot of ways. I mean, what I would say is that things have changed, I think, in local government over the years. I know when I first started off in the profession, we very much used to have a strict audit program, which external audit would place reliance upon. That's less so these days. But we definitely do try and coordinate and avoid duplication, because there's nothing more frustrating than when we both go in and do some audit work and then external audit do as well. And we do look at key systems. You are right. It's mainly from a risk basis now to see what are the biggest areas of focus that are worth focusing on and dedicating our scarce resources to, really. And we'll try and use lots of smart sort of ways of looking at that, continuous audit testing, data analytics. So, yeah, I suppose that would come under the category of some sort of perhaps pre-audit work. So we do that to a certain degree. The second one, a brilliant point. You know, you're trying to talk about the broad work we do. Absolutely. I mean, councils, the scope of what we do, so it's so varied, and I find it very exciting and interesting, and I try and promote that when we're talking about the service. So yeah, I take on board your comment about hopefully being attractive to young accountants. It would be great to lure some of that talent into our organisation. The third question around horizon scanning, yeah, very, very good point. We prepare a sort of 6-month plan. So that allows us to be agile and flex things, because the pace of change is great. But we do keep a longer term sort of program of potential work that we do, which we continuously risk appraise using loads of different factors. And I'm pleased to say that, yeah, housing definitely features within that. And I take on board your comments with regard to that. And we do have quite a few different proposed pieces of work over the longer term, which we'll pick up on rotation, of which sort of definitely condensation, damp and mould we've recognised as an area of risk. We've also looked in the past at things like electrical safety, gas safety. So those whole sort of body of housing works feature within our longer term strategy. I think any sort of work to do with the impact on finance proposals, well, that's the sort of thing I probably have ongoing dialogue with other people in the organisation, including Caroline, the Section 151 officer. So, that's something that we would keep under review about whether that's a piece of work that we want to introduce into the plan. Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I may, I think I forgot to ask one of my usual questions, which is I know you've got a very full and broad programme, but were there any areas that you would have liked to cover but didn't make the cuts?
I don't think so. I think, they're okay. As I say, I've got lots of things which will probably be coming over the next sort of following 6 to 12 month period. So no, I don't have any concerns there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the floor? Mike? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I've got you.
No problem. It's more just a comment. I'd like to thank Jonathan for the very thorough briefing that he gave us in the pre-briefing, and he explained the method of how he pulled the plan together, and I found that very good. And so thank you very much for your hard work and the report.
Yeah, if I could echo Councillor Young, as ever, Jonathan, thank you for your work and impressive report. I have a separate question, though, which is not dissimilar to Councillor Bennett's question about the STZ. It's something that's not here, but I just wondered how you may or may not fit in, and that's in relation to the work at South Cambridgeshire around the 4-day week.
Yeah, so we don't have a specific piece of work around the 4-day week within our longer term plan. It is obviously something that I'm sort of watching as interest, because as a shared service, we provide the audit service for South Cambs as well. So we are sort of probably the best way of saying it. We are involved in it. We are linked in it. We're seeing what's going on because we're very much helping that council with their sort of audit program. So while we don't have a specific piece of audit work, we are very alert and alive to what's going on. And I think one thing that we do for both councils, but probably does feature as a huge component of the 4-day week, is looking at ways of working smarter. And this is where we try and make a difference by being proactive rather than letting sort of changes happen and then coming along afterwards in the old traditional way and then scrutinising them and saying, oh, you could have thought about this and could you have not picked this up at the time? We like to be proactive and work with the people throughout the change where we can. And you know, I think both councils do tend to have quite a good positive approach where they often do come and consult with us. So while it's not a specific piece of audit work, yeah, we are involved in it, if that's hopefully some sort of assurance for you.
It is. Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I've just got a couple of small points, if I may. Page 37, prevention of fraud and corruption, internal audit works with fraud teams to support the development. That's the bit I'm on now. A summary is reported periodically to the Civic Affairs Committee on the status and levels of fraud, whistleblowing and corruption within the council. Jonathan, will we know any idea when the next report will be due, if there is, in fact, if there is even anything to report?
Thank you. Yeah, I've included, let's see if I can find it in the right part of this report. I've actually included in this one as a progress update, a brief summary on the latest state of fraud referrals, and it's going to be around page 52 of the pack. So that will probably be the best place to draw your attention. Rather than bring yet another separate report on this occasion, I've just taken the opportunity to provide an update. The key points in there: we've had 7 referrals. 2 of these would have been covered by the whistleblowing policy. So I think that's good. It's always very difficult to measure whether a high volume is a good indication that whistleblowing policy is working well, because also a great culture in an organisation would be where people speak up to their managers and then you don't need to use the whistleblowing policy. So, but look, you know, it does show that people are aware of it, which is positive. So yeah, so rather than a separate report, I've just taken the opportunity to refer to it here.
Yeah, I realised it was on 52. I just wanted to draw that out because I think it's quite important that. I know in other meetings we've actually spent some time on that. And as everybody said, it's such a detailed report. You've done so much work on it, just following things through because there's a lot for people to take in. Page 38, follow-up provision. A number of audits completed in previous years have been concerns identified that are followed up to ensure that agreed recommendations have been implemented. So my simple question there was, do you have any current concerns or any in the future that we should be thinking about now?
Well, probably what I'd bring the committee's attention to is first of all, it's really important that we do follow-up work, because there's two purposes. One, to make sure that actions are being implemented which have been agreed. But secondly, you know, other things will happen throughout that period because they can sometimes be 6 to 12 months to implement, and we may have better insight, and it's a good opportunity to adapt and perhaps tweak some of those recommendations. So it's a very, very important process, and as a result of that, we can provide assurance to the committee. In this case, there is one sort of follow-up review which we did, and we're pleased to see they've started to make progress. And that was the asbestos, but there still is a significant amount of actions to be concluded and implemented. So we will be revisiting that. Hopefully, will be a report on that by the time we come back to the committee later in the year on the progress of that. So that would be the one that I would answer in response. But apart from that, there's not a huge amount of areas of concern there.
Great, thank you very much for that. Page 48, and just to reflect what members have said, I picked this out as a report a couple of days ago, and the top line of that says, we have recently processed 245,159 records for the National Fraud Initiative. Well, that sort of reflected to me the amount of work that you guys are doing, and what Naomi has said, and Councillor Young has said, and Mike Davies said, but I'd already picked this out as just sort of highlighting just one of the things that you've been covering, this extensive report. And it's an extraordinary amount of records, isn't it? And so I just, that was my point of that, but I don't need to add my congratulations to that because everybody's done that. But I thought I'd leave it in there because it just highlights how much work is done in this report, and I think it's important to highlight that. So really, very well done to everybody, and that's just one single item, so I was a bit staggered by the size of that. So very well done to everybody for that. So that was a positive note, and that's actually me done for you, Jonathan, but I'm just going to make a comment here, just because we do have a couple of new members, and I thought, although I know your briefing was very informative, but I thought I'd just mention that on page 58 at 4.3, there's a brief description of what we're here for. And I thought that was very short and very easy to remember, and it's just a good reminder of what we're about here. And I thought that was excellent. Another piece of excellent work that's just brought it out, and I thought it was worth just pointing that out to members. So thank you very much for that. That's me done.
Thank you everyone for your feedback. I'll pass that on to my team. Thank you.
That's great. Good to see you again, Jonathan. And if everybody's satisfied, we'll move on to the final item. That will take us to item 8 on page 71. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you, Chair. So this report, it's got two purposes. One is an update on our budget setting decision-making process. And the second is to bring to you the updates to our constitution and procedures in relation to both the budget setting decision process and the consequences of the management restructure, so to bring those into our procedures and delegations. I'll talk a little bit about the budget setting decision-making process. Members will be aware that we are working on our decision-making process. We changed it and tweaked it a bit last year, and we are proposing to do the same again this year. We took feedback from the changes that we did last year. We considered further ways to improve what we do, and I suspect that this is another step on the journey. In particular, we've looked at the medium-term financial strategy, and we are proposing to move that further back in the year so that we can use the results of 6 months' worth of actual financial figures, and we can also use it as a budget, as a basis for our budget consultation, which we will run for a longer period this year. That was a change we brought in last year, but we ran it for, I think, 4 weeks, and we'll be doing it for 8 weeks in the next budget setting process. We've also added in, we've taken feedback on the scrutiny impacts last year, and there was less structured and less time for scrutiny. So we have added in very specifically or at least added back an opportunity for scrutiny at S&R in the middle of January. I don't think I have much more to say in that the changes were consulted and we took feedback from both officers and members in deriving the changes that are presented here. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Patrick?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Caroline. Devil's advocate question, is there a danger that as we divide those meetings, talk will expand to fill the time available? I think in essence it seems good and sensible, but I'm just trying to be difficult, if you like. And my experience of housing is that that unwieldy budget meeting in February can be a real killer and can squash time for debate on other non-budget related matters. So in essence, I'm totally in sympathy. But yeah, that's my devil's advocate question. How can we stop it from being talk expands to fill the time available? So we have 8 instead of 4, but then the 8 are as big as the 4 used to be.
I mean, I think there is a risk that the total time taken will be longer. But I think what that gives the opportunity for is for more people to speak, more questions to be asked, and a better understanding of what is in the budget and better scrutiny of it. So I'm certainly in favour in giving it a try. I am conscious that in previous years, the January S&R meeting in particular has got very long and very complex. And we tend to have a lot of items coming forward to that meeting because actually the previous meeting is sort of late September, October. So there's a good amount of time for additional non-budget items to come forward. So it is always a very busy meeting and the budget scrutiny takes a long time. So I understand your question. I'm hoping that it will result in better outcomes.
With the Chair's permission, I'd just like to add and answer Councillor Shield as well. There's 2 things to think about here. There's one, you're supposed to be reviewing your governance in this year. So as Caroline says, this is part of a journey you're going on. So it could be that we're looking at this as part of the governance review, and I think it's crucial that you look at the financial cycle and how it drives a lot of your decision making in a municipal year. That's important. On the dates that are in your report, I just want to highlight for you now the fact that the Budget Council meeting, because I've had a question from another member not on this committee, the budget meeting for 2024 is on the 15th of February, which is the week before February half term. As a council, you have to decide what you do with the non-budget items, because for the last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, we have had consecutive Thursdays. So we have adjourned after the budget debate, and it's one meeting that has been adjourned. You, as part of your governance review, hopefully will decide that you want to completely decouple, and how are you going to do that with a decision-making cycle that normally traditionally goes January through to February, and that's the council is the last piece of the jigsaw before you start another cycle. So at some point by the autumn, you want to decide what you do with that. I would suggest the other thing in terms of paragraph 3.4 on page 3 of the report, it lists all the changes to the meetings. I think that's important for you to communicate to your groups. We will adjust the calendar. If you agree to this report, we will adjust the calendar that's on the website tomorrow. So the calendar currently doesn't show the information that's in your reports, but will be updated in the next 24 to 48 hours. And lastly, talking to Caroline, the suggestion is that the executive meeting in February is on Monday the 5th of February. So rather than it being, and I've got the Mondays and the Thursdays around the wrong way. So it's Monday the 5th of February 2024, which will be the executive meeting that will recommend the budget to council. So I just wanted to land those messages with you. Thank you.
Sorry, Patrick, did you want to carry on with that?
Yeah, that's very helpful, Caroline. That's very helpful, Gary. And so, all in all, the way to think of it is extra strategy, extra housing, additional council. I'm looking at 3.4. Have I left anything out? Just help me to get it into my woolly head. I'm sure it's fine, but so I've got, yeah.
So you've got, can I answer?
Yeah.
So you have got additional meetings on Monday, the 20th of November, an additional housing, so that's strategy and resources, followed straight afterwards by an executive meeting. But the executive meeting will have listened to S&R. So we're going back to what we were doing 2 years ago, where the executive meets once strategy and resources has scrutinised the MTFS. You then have an additional scrutiny, housing scrutiny committee the day after, which we're looking at the HRA medium-term financial strategy. And you have a new additional council meeting on Thursday the 30th, which is just looking at the medium-term financial strategy on the HRA and the general fund. So they are new for this year. That's additional meetings. And then the other additional meeting is in January 2024, which is the strategy and resources budget only on the 15th of January. Okay? Everything else is been what we've had in the past, not necessarily on the same date, obviously.
But, Chair, may I? But that's really helpful, but even though they're all new in a way, but think of it as one divided into two in a way, would that be fair for the strategy and resources and indeed for the housing? Is that so? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I've got Mike, Mairead, Councillor Young and Councillor Bennett, but all the hands went up at the same time. So are we okay in that order, or do you want to go last, Mike? Okay.
Thank you. I think it would be really helpful, though, to add narrative when this has been agreed. I think one of the problems that we had last year in the first changes, that, if I'm honest, people weren't sure what they were there or what they were doing at each meeting, which led to confusion and was particularly difficult, I think, for the chair of Strategy and Resources. So I think it would be really helpful. The second point I'd make is it goes back to, to Councillor Young's point that was made at S&R earlier in the week. I think it's useful to know who's going to be in that narrative, who's going to be there and when, so that the appropriate scrutiny can be made of the individual executives should there be a question over their particular portfolio. Now, I think I know, but I think it would be helpful if that was clarified, because then it's differentiating between the overall financial strategy and planning for the council with the specific details around the individual executive councillors' responsibilities. I just think that extra narrative, once we've agreed the dates, would be fantastic. The only other thing to add, I think, is just to clarify again why the decision in the first meeting on November the 20th, which was my birthday, so presents will be welcomely accepted, but the executive meeting follows S&R, but the meeting in January executive doesn't follow it. What was the thinking behind, if you could be, I think I know, but if you could just explain the thinking behind not specifically.
Yeah. So in November, the purpose of the executive meeting is to essentially approve the consultation, which will be based on the MTFS and will start the following day. So it is taking the scrutiny, it's taking the MTFS and approving it for consultation with any tweaks or changes that may come out of that. In January, our process is going to be a bit different from previously. So the 15th of January is the S&R scrutiny meeting, I think. And at that stage, we will have draft detailed budget proposals, but we will not have a final draft BSR. One reason we won't have that is because the consultation will still be going on. So there will be the opportunity for scrutiny of the detailed proposals. The only other thing we will have at that stage is the MTFS, which will have already been scrutinised. And we may have some updates on provisional settlements and things like that. So what then happens, the executive there hasn't got a final BSR to recommend to council. So the executive is later. So the executive will take a final BSR, which will be a combination of the detailed proposals that have been scrutinised. The output of the consultation and any changes that come as a result of that. Plus, we will have a chance to have tidied up things like business rates, the provisional settlement, to make a final document. So the executive is there to, the executive will be the first outing for the final BSR, which will be recommended to council at that point. And going right back to the consultant where we took advice, you may recall that his advice was that the final BSR, the final version, would then effectively have its final scrutiny and discussion at council. So that's the reasons for the different timings of the executive following S&R.
Mairead, it's yours.
Yeah, my question's in relation to the consultation. So yeah, really supportive of the extension from 4 weeks to 8 weeks. I think that's really important. I think we've obviously got really difficult decisions to make in the years ahead that will particularly potentially impact on our most vulnerable communities. So I'd be really grateful if we can put a lot of thought into how we're going to engage the community and ensure it's a really participative approach. I think things like maybe an easy read version of the draft budget, you know, making it as accessible as possible, because unfortunately these are not the most engaging consultations, I think, for people. But I think anything we can do, and particularly working with our communities team, if we can kind of get the consultation into our community centres, but just making it as participative as possible. I think it's really important that the community are involved in it if there's difficult decisions to be made. Yeah, so thanks.
Thank you for that, and it is certainly something that we will give some thoughts to. I think it's interesting to note that I've also had some thoughts from another councillor who has said, can we provide lots of information? Can we have an intelligent and engaged electorate? So I think your suggestion of an easy to read version against a more complex version, if we can somehow achieve that, feels like a way forward. But I'm conscious of both ends of the spectrum and what might be useful for one person may be less so for others. So I think we will certainly give it some thought, and thank you for your input.
But I don't think a more complex version is going to aid participation in a consultation. I think our aim is to ensure that we have as many people as possible participating and that we have a wider group as possible from socio-economic and from various protected characteristics participating. Thanks.
I absolutely agree with that. Councillor Bennett.
Before I ask the questions I was planning to ask, could I just ask, now that we have a fourth party in council, could I just confirm my understanding that because they're not a group, they don't have a right to present an alternative budget?
So when we've had a situation where there's been a single councillor who is not a group, the mayor of their day has allowed that person to make a introductory speech rather than produce an alternative budget. And I don't see any reason why I wouldn't be advising the chair of the mayor of that precedent.
And we did it for Councillor Hipkin over a number of years, didn't we? Yeah.
Okay, that's quite helpful because I was really quite worried how it's going to work out. I know it's a strain on everybody having possibly 3 sets of papers to work. I was hoping that it would run a bit more smoothly this year for Green and Independent Group. It certainly didn't go smoothly last year. Now that I actually have a third pair of hands to do this, with Councillor Tong joining us, who is actually taking public finance options in his economics degree. However, I'm aware of the reasons for timing, but it's a nightmare for all of us because it's over busy season exams and the peak of award work, which was brutal last year, and we're expecting it to be similarly bad this coming winter. So what I'm just saying is I wanted to give you a warning that it's going to be problematic for us. And we have been thinking about how we were going to deal with this. And one of the suggestions we had is that we might give you a sort of heads up quite early, possibly even on Monday, 20th November, about our areas of concern. And we'd be quite happy to share that with the other political groups, because to be honest, we're not really interested in making political capital. We just want to tell you what we think. But I think it's likely that we'll be still looking at an informal presentation rather than getting up, wasting your staff's time over the Christmas holiday, doing a full third set of budgets. So that's really my heads up, and hopefully, Caroline, you and I and Elliot and Sam will find time to sit down over the summer and plan our approach and attack. Thank you.
I would certainly welcome starting on that earlier and getting a view of what you would like to look at. It's always extremely busy for us at that time of year, and we do have a worry, I think, that we may see our external auditors at around that time as well, which certainly won't help us, any of us. But yes, welcome an early engagement on that.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Young, did you indicate to speak? I believe you did.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say this is, what's in this report is the result of lots of consultation with the opposition, and so I'd like to say thank you for that. Clearly, I think I echo comments from someone else, but it's clearly a step in the process, and we're going to be looking at governance as well. So it sounds like a step in the right direction to me. So thank you to everyone for that. I also have a request that the information on the revised timeline is shared. I think just the potential for confusion when changes like this are made are huge. So if everyone can make an effort to inform everyone, that would be great. Yeah, finally, just Caroline, maybe you and I can get together and just chat through the process, because I would also like to be as helpful as possible. And this is the process here is very different to what I'm used to. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was going to be my parting comment, but I don't need to make it now, that we need to make all members aware of what we've done here, because it's quite confusing for some of us sitting here listening to it, never mind if you weren't here. So, yeah, I think it would be very helpful. Mike?
Sorry, Russ, I think it would be helpful as long as that narrative is there explaining what each of the meetings are for, because that's the bit that we might have an idea of, those of us who've been here before, but I don't think others will.
And that was, I didn't explain it very well, actually, because that's exactly what I meant, because it can be really confusing. Caroline?
So can I suggest that maybe I put together a detailed or more detailed briefing paper of my understanding how things will work based on the discussions that we've had, and maybe that is circulated. I'm just suggesting that actually now's the time to do this before we get into the process.
Can I suggest it might be really helpful if it goes to me, Councillor Smith, Councillor Bennett and Councillor Young. I'm particularly interested in Councillor Young's view coming from a different authority. So therefore, if it's clear to you, then it'll be clear to us. Does that make sense, Chair?
I will, in the next week or two, put something down on paper.
Yeah. Okay. I believe that, unless I'm wrong, concludes the business of the day. So thank you very much, everybody. There's a lot of work there. Safe journey home for those of you who are going home, and those of us who aren't, hope you've got a sandwich.